This episode of Wine and Crime is brought to you by Progressive Insurance.
Do you ever think about switching insurance companies to see if you could save some cash? Progressive makes it easy to see if you could save when you bundle your home and auto policies.
Try it at Progressive.com.
Progressive Casualty Insurance Company and affiliates. Potential savings will vary. Not available in all states.
Hey, I'm Ryan Reynolds.
Recently, I asked Mint Mobile's legal team if big wireless companies are allowed to raise prices due to inflation. They said yes. And then when I asked if raising prices technically violates those onerous two-year contracts, they said, "What the f*** are you talking about, you insane Hollywood ass?" So to recap, we're cutting the price of Mint Unlimited from $30 a month to just $15 a month.
Give it a try at mintmobile.com/switch.
$45 upfront payment equivalent to $15 per month. New customers on first 3-month plan only. Taxes and fees extra. Speed slower above 40 gigabytes. See details.
Wine and Crime contains graphic and explicit content which may not be suitable for some listeners. Listener discretion is advised. Are listening to Wine and Crime, the podcast where two friends, and in this case, a special guest, chug wine, chat true crime, and unleash your worst Minnesotan or maybe Canadian accents.
Northern accents.
Northern accents. My name is Amanda.
I am Lucy.
And we are joined today by the incredible David Ridgen of Someone Knows Something podcast. So welcome, David.
Hey, thanks for having me. I'm up here in Canada, Toronto.
Oh, bless it. We're having very similar weather, it sounds like, right now.
It's cold and windy and dark.
And today's episode is going to be a little different than what a regular Wine and Crime typically looks like. We just really wanted to have an awesome conversation with David about some subjects, specifically the ethics of true crime that come up in this space over and over and over again when you do this work. And also have him kind of break down a current case that he is working on today. So this might not be the exact same structure of Wine and Crime that you are familiar with, but we are very excited to have this conversation and just hear more about your work, David, and have you share what you're working on now.
Sounds good.
I don't know if you are a big wine drinker, but Canadian wine is lit. All right. Ontario and British Columbia are the two largest wine-producing provinces in Canada, with 2/3 of Canada's vineyard acreage situated in Ontario. However, wine-producing regions are also present in other provinces, including Alberta, Quebec, New Brunswick, and Nova Scotia. Because of Canada's notoriously chilly weather patterns, ice wine, which originated in Germany, is made in abundance. This is a very popular... Yeah, and I think we actually have paired an ice wine in the past. It's a dessert wine. It's very sweet. It's produced from grapes that have been frozen while still on the vine, which is a super cool process.
Cool.
The sugars and other dissolved solids do not freeze, but the water in the grape does, allowing for a more concentrated grape juice to develop in those grapes. The grape's must is then pressed from the frozen grapes, resulting in a smaller amount of more concentrated and very sweet juice. So with ice wines, like we said, the freezing happens before fermentation. It's happening to the grapes while they're on the vine and not after fermentation. So unlike grapes from which other dessert wines are made, which will be frozen or, chilled after or during the process of fermentation, these freeze on the vine. I personally love how winemaking can adapt and work with like the growing conditions of a region, and that willingness to work with the earth rather than against it creates something really special like this ice wine. Sweeter dessert style wines are the easiest to make in Canadian wine regions just because of the weather, which has caused Canadian winemakers to get creative as taste preferences have shifted throughout the decades to a desire for more dry table wines. That's what people just want to be drinking on the daily. Some techniques that we know well in Minnesota winemaking are genetically modified and hybrid grape varietals that are hardier against the cold and also able to ripen in such a way that they can produce a drier product. Now, as I mentioned, it's noon on a Wednesday as the crow flies. So I'm not drinking wine. I do have a cup of coffee and a giant thing of water, but I wanted to shout out Peller Estates. Have you ever had anything from Peller Estates, David?
I think it's pretty widespread, the Peller stuff. I mean, there's a lot of other wines that I've had and tried from Ontario, Canada, and Peller does ring a bell. And it's definitely
they're an OG.
big place, yeah.
They're definitely one of the biggest wineries in Canada. They have been producing award-winning wine since the end of Canadian Prohibition in 1927. And they do ship to the United States. So if you want to check them out, they have a really, really cool catalog of, if you're interested in ice wine, they have a lot of really beautiful ones. They have rosés, they have sparkling, they have some really nice like reserve red blends. They also had a beautiful looking Cabernet that I was very curious about. So you can check them out at peller.com. That's PELLER.com.
Can I shout one out too? Or
Yes, please.
Yeah, Sandbanks Estates Wines, which comes out of Prince Edward County. It's sort of like a little island-ish thing on southeastern Ontario area, jets out into Lake Ontario. Very sandy soil, red cedar all over the place. So that it's very partial to a special tree, red cedar, which doesn't grow that easily elsewhere in Ontario. And I do know that the Baco Noir is the one that I really liked from Sandbanks, and they ship.
That sounds beautiful.
It's a great spot too. It's like a real isolated, interesting little spot in Ontario, and up and coming.
I love it.
Yep.
Sandbanks Winery. I'm at their website.
Drop it in the notes so
I
that
will.
we can put that on our sources as well, so people can check them out too.
Oh, they got
That's awesome.
They got a bunch.
Just a boatload of product.
Boatload of wine.
I just like the word noir and all of it too, but it also, I just think it tastes great too. I don't know anything about wine, so the listener should know. I like salty wine. I like Chateauneuf du Pape and stuff like from France and stuff like that, but I like salty wine. And that's about it, right? Mm-hmm. But it also gives me sometimes headaches, sometimes not. I would say red's better than white for some reason, but with me anyway.
Agreed.
With me, yeah.
Yeah, well, that sugar content is also lower. Yeah. So that definitely helps.
I've never heard of salty as like a tasting note.
Well, there you go. I'm not I told you. I just think. Well, I think that's how I can taste it. I don't know how I do that. But.
No,
it's
there's
all definitely
valid.
like briny wines, peppery wines. Like you can get, everybody's tasting notes and preferences are going to be unique and different. And I love that. That's one of the fun things about tasting wine is that 5 people in a room can all be drinking the same exact thing and taste something completely different. 100%. It's kind of like magic.
Yeah, the Sandbanks people are not going to be too pleased to hear that I said their wine was salty. But anyway.
Check out their super salty wine.
It was more the French wine that I was mentioning, yeah.
You can find it next to the dusty wines.
yeah, the
dusty, dirty, salty.
That dirt-flavored wine next to that, yeah. Anyway.
I love it. All right, well, let's take a quick break to hear a word from our sponsors and then come back and dive into some curious conversation. It's still January, people. It's still the new year, and you might be thinking about switching some things up, switching up your routine, reimagining yourself. And there's a pretty easy way to do that. Your wardrobe, baby. You can refresh your look with quality pieces and stay on budget thanks to Quince, our besties.
First of all, I just have to say, I think everyone needs Quince's cozy Mongolian cashmere sweaters that start at $50.
Yep, I'm with you there.
Don't deprive yourself. And this time of year, I am all about layering. So if you're looking for some good layerables, or if you're a workout kind of person, some new active wear, their moisture wicking bras and leggings are designed to move with you, whether you're doing full Pilates or you're running to Starbucks.
Yep.
However you choose to refresh your look this year, all Quince pieces are priced 50 to 80% less than similar brands. And they're able to do this because they partner directly with top factories, cutting out the cost of the middleman and passing those savings on to you. And if you got nervous when I said factories, don't worry, because Quince only works with factories that use safe, ethical, and responsible manufacturing practices. And of course, they use premium fabrics and finishes for that luxury feel in every piece. If you just want like a couple of pieces that isn't going to stretch your budget at all, that
are
you feel
timeless.
They're timeless, they're classy, they look good, like you look polished and put together. I mean, I'm always looking for ways to look like I have my life
in
together.
order. Girl, same.
So Quince, excellent place to start.
She's got your back. Update your closet this year without the upgraded price tag. Go to quince.com/wine for 365-day returns plus free shipping on your order. That's QUINCE.com/wine to get free shipping and 365-day returns. Quince.com/wine. I was a renter for years and years and years and years, and I wish I had known or had access to something like this as a renter. So, PSA for anyone who rents, if you have not heard of Built, B-I-L-T, you're about to thank us. Earning points on rent is now a reality when you pay your rent through Built. You don't even have to check with your landlord to start earning points that can be used toward flights, hotel stays, fitness classes, even your next rent payment. Let us break it down for you, babes.
Yeah, there is no cost to join Built, and as a member, you'll earn valuable points on rent and on your everyday spending. Built points can be transferred to your favorite hotels and airlines, and even the ones you haven't heard of. There are over 500 airlines and 700,000 hotels and properties around the world you can redeem your Built points toward. Points can also be redeemed towards a future rent payment and unique experiences that only Built members can access. So if you're not earning points on rent, my question is, why not?
Start earning points on rent you're already paying by going to joinbuilt.com/gals. That's JOINBILT.com/gals. Make sure to use our URL so they know who sent you. Joinbuilt.com/gals to start earning points on your rent payments today. All right, we are back and we are going to break it down with our new friend, David. we put together just a list of things that we're kind of curious about. To open up the conversation, but wherever this goes, we're open to.
I mean, I think that we should maybe start. David, can you tell our listeners, if they're not familiar with your show, Someone Knows Something, can you just tell us what the general basis of your show is and how you break out different cases, topics in different seasons?
Sure. Someone Knows Something is it's called a true crime show, a true crime podcast, and it comes out of this Canadian Broadcasting Corporation, which is the CBC. It's a publicly funded broadcaster here in Canada. I don't know for how long it's going to be remaining a publicly funded broadcaster, but that's where it comes from. Devised and designed Someone Knows Something at CBC in 2014, 2015, based on my work in investigative reporting on unsolved murders, disappearances, things like that I'd started in 2004. So I started as a television documentary producer doing that. I was also a filmmaker in my previous life before that, making dramas and documentaries. But at CBC, I kind of fell into the role of investigating a case in Mississippi, a Klan murder from 1964, the murder of Charles Moore and Henry D. by the Ku Klux Klan. And that investigation went very well. I mean, in terms of investigations, it took many years, and I worked with family member Thomas Moore, whom I'm still in touch with. And together we looked at documents, FBI reports. Together we investigated by talking to witnesses that had never spoken before, et cetera, et cetera. All the kind of hallmarks you might imagine somebody in a true crime space would do now, because it seems like it's happening all over. However, not everybody's doing it working with family members, and not everybody does it. I would say almost nobody does it working for years. The last podcast, which we were going to talk about, season 9 for Someone Knows Something, is at the 15-year mark now in terms of how much time it's taken, or how long I've been working on it, at least.
Wow.
And I'm still working with Thomas. And God, I was in my truck today listening to an interview with a police officer who had gathered together a bunch of other police in the same room in 1965, and they were recording. Just talking about cases in their area down in Natchez, Mississippi. And I was listening, and this is a recording I've had since 2005, getting it out of an archive in the States. And there's stuff I missed in it. I've missed some of the case material in it, so I want to go dig back into that too. Not for the Dean Moore case, but for other cases that turn up as you're going through this. So anyway, Someone Knows Something, true crime space. We're at the 9th season now, and I always work with family members. I don't work alone. I always make sure that family is on board. They either contact me and want me to do it with them, work on the case, find out what happened to my daughter, my son, my husband, etc. Or I'll dig up a case and maybe reach out to them, and see what they think about working with me on it. Sometimes it's successful. I reach out and family will say, yes, let's do it. Sometimes they say, no, I want to break your arm, go away. And then that same person comes back 9 months later and says, okay, I'm sorry, let's do it. And that's happened. Other times they just say, no, we're not interested. But mostly it's people coming to me. And I found lots of different reasons to work with family. I don't know if you want me to just keep on bulldozering you here.
Yes, please, because you're really covering a lot of the stuff that I had curiosity about kind of balancing that emotional impact on the families with that responsibility of getting the facts out there and seeking justice, and like your process for choosing, or I guess embracing, cases that come to you or that you find to get across the finish line to, you know, a season.
There's many reasons to work with family. Okay. I mean, from a storytelling point of view, just a sort of crass based storytelling selfishness, it's a great story to see somebody who has a great need to be filled, a great loss that they need to recover from, and then see how they might change throughout the process. I mean, it's a mindless, you'd have to be a crazy person to not see the potential of storytelling in that. But that's just the tip of the iceberg. For me, it's working with family is proof against exploitation. I say that a lot. Like, if the family member is there with me, then I'm not exploiting them. Like, they want to be there. Mostly I say that SKS is not a true crime show. I say that it is more like a self-healing show, because when you confront these spaces that you haven't before been able to, or for whatever reason haven't entered, you start to correct some of the guilt that you've assumed as a family member. Victims of true crime, people closest to the person that has been murdered or disappeared, exhibit these kinds of guilt and trauma that I don't think are found in regular trauma. Like, we all have trauma in our lives. We all have, you know, I almost got hit by a car, or my dad died, or, you know, my cat died, or whatever. And those are traumas we all deal with. But in a true crime, we can answer the questions behind those. Why did the cat die? You know, why did my father die? Why? But in true crime, there are victims of true crime. The answers aren't there. They don't have a body. They don't know what happened. And that brings in a type of guilt that can't be solved through just stasis, or even just looking at the case themselves, like Googling it or talking to police about it. I find that active participation in the case, looking at those pictures, actually reading autopsy reports, looking at all the information we could possibly gather, helps these family members for the first time. So every single case that I've worked on, I can see that transformation. And it's not just me seeing it and telling you how great I am and I've transformed these people. Like, they actually have said to me, this has changed me. And, you know, it takes maybe a few months or a year or two to hear that back. But then I hear it, and you can see it, and you can hear it in the conversation with them. So it's like a self-healing moment, you know, a big moment.
I really like how layered and nuanced your approach is to the content that you put out, because it's not just like, okay, here's this season, here's this missing person, we're going to solve this case.
Right.
By talking to the family, going through evidence, blah, blah, blah. It's like, yes, of course, that is the end goal, but it's about so much more, just holistically telling their story, remembering that person, telling their story to a wider audience, helping the family process, and hopefully getting new pieces of information that will, in the end, solve this case. But that's not the sole focus.
Well, no, and it's also, there's shades of gray in every story. And the family members, victims' family members, I think that there is a tendency to kind of idolize them or put them on a pedestal, and they can do or say no wrong. And, you know, oh, they're crying now, we should be sad. And I think that it's a lot more difficult for me to just present stories that way. And like, there's complexity within the families themselves and the victimologies. And those things I try to show as much as I can. I'm not going to try to, put something that isn't there, but I don't think that it's as easy as there's good guys, bad guys, and somewhere there's a killer out there. Killers walk amongst us, and stuff like that. Of course they do. Like fuck.
It can be harmful when we, as consumers of true crime, do put family members and people close to these cases on pedestals, because it kind of like dehumanizes them.
It does, yeah. It forces them to be in that box. These are human beings,
yeah.
Right? It forces
imperfect, complex human beings who, you are kind of helping through a process of, like you say, healing. And we are witnessing that vulnerability in real time through a podcast. So, so much can come up along that journey. And as you said, so much can change over time. People can change their perspective. People can change their mind. So it is important to see not only the victims, but the survivors as human. We have flaws, and this is a process of healing when you're carrying that kind of heavy mantle.
And not make them into like a two-dimensional like celebrity almost.
Right.
Yeah, I mean, that's celebrity with the John Bennett stuff, which I'm sure we'll get into and stuff. And clearly, I mean, anyway, I have strong opinions about that case and other cases that I've looked at briefly. But anyway.
I mean, don't we all? That is one of the most polarizing true crime conversations and enduring stories in the U.S., at least in the true crime space.
Yeah, and that one's getting volleyed around again, too.
Yeah,
like the Netflix and the,
Before we get back into that, just sorry I brought that up. Because I know you guys want to talk about it. Just in terms of the family members, what I found is going through the seasons and going through, I call it a season, but going through my life, which is 365, 24/7 SKS basically. I haven't yet kind of dropped out of anybody's lives that I've worked with. I'm in constant communication with people. I consult with people, other family members about cases. They call other family members from other seasons and try to help them. Like I'm starting to get this synergy of people calling from season 4 or season 3 and like trying to call people from season 5 and, and like getting together in kind of these support groups, really. Like, and that's what it kind of becomes.
There is a pretty powerful community building that we've noticed being in the true crime, podcasting space now for the better part of, 9 years. And that's one of, I think, the surprising and good impacts of, true crime as a genre if you approach it in a holistic and respectable way, that you really can connect people with all different backgrounds who are bringing their own experiences into looking at a case or discussing a case and seeing it in a different way, and then also offering support to each other, which I think is a really powerful thing. Yeah, it's great. How do you maintain your wellness and your mental health in this work? Because I have to imagine this is, the secondhand trauma and proximity trauma is a very real thing. And, as you say, this is your life. You're living this work. So, for any of the rest of us who could maybe take some tips from you on how to not completely lose your mind.
Yeah, I'd like to say that it's kind of similar for anybody who deals with it, like police or family members or people that have to continually look at the things you can't unsee or unhear, photos, etc., crime scenes, just interactions with people. In this recent case, interacting with the person who inevitably I would be confronting at a trailer park. Those kinds of things don't go away. And it is true that people directly associated with it probably suffer more, i.e. myself. So, I mean, first of all, I'll just say, in that question, I always say, look, I chose this career path, like boohoo, snowflakey, like fuck off. Like if it bothers you, get out, and it does bother you, but I like doing it and I see the effects of it. And I try to find other things to focus on when I'm not working in this area, which is hard, but, focus on nature, ecosystems. I look on iNaturalist I use with my son, Owen. We're out looking at insects. We're scuba diving. We're, checking out shark teeth on the beach and focusing on completely nothing to do with, that kind of human spawned darkness. We look at
literally touching grass, as they say.
Literally lying in grass, staring up at the stars at night, obviously, or even in the day. But stuff like that, it does help. It's a communing, and I have a family that understands what I do. I don't think have much interest in the podcast I do, which helps a lot. Like I don't know that they've listened to them. And that's great. And I do self-medicate. I have the odd beer, we'll just say, and maybe some wine. But I think it's just how does anybody deal with anything? And I get as much help from family members, in this regard as they may get from the process that we go through with SKS. So there's sort of an ongoingness to it. Frankly, though, I do think I'm pushing it downstream. I think the more active, I like to stay active. And I think I find that the more active I am, the less this stuff comes to haunt me. But often after a few months, I can get caught up. It catches up to me, and I'll be in conversation. And you've probably heard it. If you listen to SKS, you probably heard me seize up, and I just can't talk. And I'm like, oh, it's really weird. It's like that happens to me. Come on, like I can I can overpower this, but it happens. It comes. So the unconscious or whatever, not the Freudian one, but the actual one, something's going on back there that's processing this stuff and it doesn't like it. And I think that's the same with probably anybody in this realm.
Yeah.
I just have to deal with it, right? Like I exercise regularly and I'm okay.
Well, and I think you bring up a good point. Like we do have autonomy over where we put our energy and the jobs that we choose to do. And so we have to hold the responsibility of what comes with those choices as well.
100%. Yeah.
Our friend Josh Hallmark hosts the show True Crime Bullshit. And that is several seasons. It's all focused on Israel Keys.
Oh, yeah.
And he does a lot of like the boots on the ground research investigating.
Yeah.
And I recently visited his studio in the Berkshires and I was like, your studio is beautiful. It's like pastel walls and like house plants, gorgeous lighting, huge windows. And he's like, yeah, man, we're researching and documenting the roughest shit. Like I needed a beautiful space to do it in.
Yeah. Yeah, no, I understand that. And I have a couple of places I go to sometimes to do my reading for SKS down by a river in Eastern Ontario. And I get quite a lot of calm from that. So, I mean, it's, you just seek out these places that you're lucky enough to be able to access.
And it's also important to put together a great team. Like you said at the top, this isn't only you alone on an island doing this work. Like you're working with families, you're working with professionals and other people who are helping carry that mantle. So how did you kind of put together, like how do you discern and develop that like trust and relationship with people, not just the family members, but anyone, researchers, anyone that's kind of helping you put together this questions over time?
Questions I always get about how you do it. Like how do you get people to talk to you? Or how do you build trust? I think it's just, you just try to be as, like you give honesty, you'll get honesty, Like I just think it's a lot of, I tend to reveal things about myself to people that I've never met, and not in a weird way. I'll use an example that's something apropos with what we're talking about from my life, and I'll throw that out, and as a truth that I, may not have ever told anybody before, right? So, and people know that, when someone's being honest with you, that. So you're creating a space instantly for someone to fill, right? When you give them that moment, that expectation gets filled. And often when I find that if I'm honest, I get it back. And I get passion back too. Because so if I give a passion for wanting to solve the thing, solve the case, solve myself, solve the person, help them solve themselves, whatever the thing is, you get that passion back. The give a little, get a little really is really the bottom line for the whole thing. I mean, that sounds stupid or whatever, but that's how
it's all mutual too. Like, you trust them, they trust you, everyone heals together.
Yeah, I think if you approach these, especially in the true crime space, so much of it can feel really transactional and, like you said, exploitative. And so really entering into like real and authentic relationship with other people in this work is very important, just to not be a complete fucking asshole.
Yeah, no, and it's not all sunshine either. Like I sometimes don't get to talk to people. Sometimes people don't want to talk to me. Sometimes people tell me to get the fuck off their property. Very rarely, actually, strangely. More often I'm in cooking beans with them for breakfast or whatever. But,
I love beans for breakfast.
But whatever, it doesn't always work. And then sometimes people just think I'm an asshole no matter what I do or say, right? It's that era. It's the era of doesn't matter what you do or say, everything can be up as down, right? So you don't really know if it's going to work all the time, but chances are it will, because we all have the same kind of sense of, I think, need to talk about things.
Do you get pushback from like police and investigative teams?
I have.
Because I feel like that happens a lot in the States. I mean, we certainly have strong opinions about the United States justice system, but it can be really hard for systems, judicial systems, government systems to be open to working collaboratively with, reporters, investigators, other, private investigators, things like that. So if you want to talk about any of those experiences, trying to actually work with any of the investigators or police on these cases and what that's been like.
Yeah, I think I've met police and investigators and former investigators who are much more likely to work with you, people that aren't currently working, by the way,
right,
as you know, who will work with me and some who won't. And some who started off not wanting to, and then they sort of saw the proof of what was going on and realized that maybe they could, I don't know what the reason for, what was it, a cynical reason, self-benefit, whatever. Then they start to help you. Once they realize you're not going away, you're going to keep asking the same questions. You're going to ask for that document another 20 times in 1,400 different ways. So they're not, they either give into it or they realize that they could actually help and you're not there to screw them. Like,
right.
the more I don't run to the newsroom and give them little nuggets of information I get, the more I'm trusted, and that's not what I do. Like, and people, the proof's in nine seasons, plus my other documentaries and stuff, that I just don't act that way. I don't operate that way. So in fact, in Canada now, the reputation has preceded me, and police are much more interested in working with me now because I think they've seen the proof, So
yeah,
and even though I've
there.
exposed in some cases, police malfeasance or sort of bad investigative technique, but not normally, only when it happens and only if it really affected a case, which is of course season 9. But I'm fair, and then I think they're fair. But I can also understand detectives. I have a lot of time for most detectives. They're trained not to deal with media for good reason. They're trained to have holdback cases fall or, rise or fall on the holdback sometimes, and things that don't hold up in court. You just don't want to seed a community with bad information. And same with podcasters, people that are doing investigations or armchair enthusiasts, which, seem to be a dime a dozen now. Should realize that their research screws cases sometimes because they don't know how to do it, and because they can't keep a secret, and because they keep telling everybody with broken telephone something, and then 20 other people tell the same story, but it's different by the end of it, and then you seeded totally incorrect information throughout a community and ruin the case, basically.
Right. Which is a big part of the, in the JonBenet case, like that is a huge factor, is misinformation. There are so many cases. I can't speak to Canada or Canadian media in general, but in the US, we have serious problems with
propaganda,
media frenzy, celebritification of victims and their families, and then how the court of public opinion can completely turn on people. And I certainly have my thoughts and feelings about, in particular, the JonBenet Ramsey case. But I can also acknowledge that the media coverage of it was biased from the beginning.
Oh, yeah.
And the investigation was botched from the beginning. And then, like you said, like a giant game of national telephone happens, and then people are holding things all these years later as fact.
Yeah.
That actually are not reality.
Yeah, it has nothing to do with it. And maybe one reporter, just a new reporter or even an old reporter, made one mistake, right? And that single mistake and no one realized it, that mistake has been reprinted in minds and conversations for 20, 30 years. And then it's like, fuck, you have to be really careful, and you have to be really, really meticulous in your research. And you can't reveal everything to everybody. Even the families I work with, I reveal often very little about what I'm learning, because the family, bless them, doesn't know. And sometimes we'll tell a friend in town what I learned about another friend that they both know. And it's like, there it goes. The information's gone then, because you just have seeded the community. So basically, a month later, when I go and speak to another guy on the other end of town, that info's gotten to him, right? So then I'm interviewing them about my same information. Here's a good example of fucking cases up. So the Melanie Ethier case happened up in New Liskeard, Ontario. And I won't go into the details, but young woman disappears, never found. The podcast I did for The Next Call, which was an offshoot of Someone Knows Something, telephone-based investigation, came up with the perpetrator. We're pretty sure we know who it is. But during the production, there's a psychic in town or nearby who's doing this to all Ontario cases. I will not name this person. They have special beeps and boops, and they have some kind of radio signal that they monitor, and they can apparently talk to the dead. So somehow somebody else that I'm closely working with on this podcast this guy has called them, and unbeknownst to them has started telling him stuff that I found out. So lo and behold, next week, before I'm even near publication, this psychic has figured out the information I just did. Like I just found out. So because he found it from another family member. So except he's hearing it from beyond the dead, right? Like the dead are telling him this information, and he's adding his own little twist to it.
That's all you had to do, David. Just channel the dead.
Just channel the fucking dead.
Work smarter, not harder, you know?
So then by the time the podcast comes, you see what happens. It's like, oh, but wait, that already came out. He got that from the psychic. You know, so it's like this insane loop of impossibility where there's no way I would ever have gotten anything from a psychic. And in fact, the reverse is true, but I can't talk about that because then it reveals the source that told him, and I don't want to do that. So it's like, that's why I never talk about him really in the podcast, because this gives him energy. Now I've just given him more energy. But anyway, that's how stuff can get screwed up. People talking about information that they think is true.
Well, for sure. And I mean, in media, it's all about who broke the story first, controls the narrative, and is then automatically put in a position of being the authority over that information that's released. And then things like what you just described are certainly happening behind the scenes all the time with all of these cases that reach that level of popularity and the ones that don't.
Yeah, you can't believe any real Google information you read. You really have to look at primary documents. You have to talk to primary sources. You have to talk to witnesses that have never been talked to before, or that were talked to once by police. You know, make sure. And then you ask them, how many times have you told this story? Who did you tell? You know, I have to find that out. I have to find out like where the directions are. So I have to research those stories. And if they told it to another reporter, I have to compare what they said back then. Well, it's actually an investigative technique to compare what they said now to what they said to me, or before to what they said to me. But anyway, information's all over the place now, and cases can suffer for it. I mean, they can also benefit from them too. For people finding documents and putting primary sources out there, that's a good thing. Yeah,
it's such a double-edged sword. I mean, I think we think about that. Now, I mean, to be frank and honest, and anyone listening to our show knows this, like, we do not do the style of podcasting that you do. We are not journalists.
We're not boots on the ground.
We don't take on investigation. You know, we more look into stories mostly that have already been solved.
Yes.
That pique our interest.
Yeah. Amanda can't psychologically handle an unsolved case.
I have too much ADHD for that. It's just loose. Those open ends keep me awake at night, and I know my limits.
Yeah, there's a lot of those.
But, you know, a lot of what we do when we have researchers that help us put together all those details, but we're also short form. So we don't do we're not serialized. We don't do a whole season on one particular case. So we have to be creative about what we focus on when we're covering these cases that all have their own level of complexity. But I feel like a lot of where we land is a lot of scrutiny of the judicial system and, you know, the investigative process. Right. Obviously the husband.
Or the mother.
Or the mother, or, you know, anyone. But reflecting on those elements of what can disrupt the pathway to justice is a lot of what we will talk about in the cases that we cover. And, you know, wrongful convictions are cases that we cover pretty consistently because it's such a glaring problem in the United States, and it is, you know, everywhere. But, you know, we're based here. But it's challenging because in this genre, like, we do have a responsibility to respect and honor and humanize the victims in these cases, to also respect and honor and humanize the surviving families. And I firmly believe not necessarily respecting and honoring, but also humanizing the perpetrators in these cases, to kind of get to the what all fell into place to allow this to happen. Because typically a victim was obviously failed at many turns, and also a perpetrator was often failed at many turns leading up to that point. And that's not necessarily to sympathize with a perpetrator of a crime, but in the United States, we do not approach justice from like a holistic or preventative lens at all. Mm-hmm. And so having those kinds of conversations, I think, can be really important, because if we're not preventing or
understanding,
trying to focus on and understand and solve the systemic issues that often lead to violent crime, then, like, what are we fucking doing?
Mm-hmm. Agreed. And I don't think the problem is, you know, something, as you say, it's not isolated to the United States. I worked in the prison system up here for years. I worked the penitentiaries, most of the big federal penitentiaries in Canada. I've worked in Ontario. I was a teacher, actually. I was there for a couple of years. Pretty much all the max and medium and some of the minimums I was in, which is really weird because I'm claustrophobic and I hate being locked into rooms, but that's what was happening.
Oh, yeah.
What a career path.
But it was, you see the other side, which is dank, horrible living situations, no, computers that are 50 years old that they're trying to tap on. There's no interest in trying to rejuvenate or resuscitate any of the people that I saw, really. It's basically just throw them in there. And there was, work farms and things like that. And there have been programs that are, I think, successful. There seems to be less information or less interest in making those programs work these days. So it's the same here. And, I think it's a bit more exponential down in the States right now. But we have the same issues with incarceration, recidivism, and not a lot of attention paid. And I'm not here to say let's all be sympathetic to murderers and killers and horrible people and all that kind of stuff.
No.
But they got there somehow, and there's
Right.
a system that belies all of it that is supposed to help them. And if there's a system that can bring some kind of success to their lives and therefore others, even in terms of will they speak to the victims' families? Can they bring themselves to talk to the victims' families? Because that's important to actually get those conversations going. Will there be reconciliation? And sometimes the incarceration process can lead to that. And I don't think there's much interest in that. I don't think there's a lot of interest in that kind of a methodology, but at least writ large.
Yeah.
I think
Oh, go ahead.
sometimes it's certainly in the US and among true crime audiences, I think some of that empathy is really lacking. And there's sort of like this, again, with putting victims' families on pedestals and in turn kind of dehumanizing them. Then there's like this thirst for vengeance that is shrouded in the lie of wanting justice. And what people like, then the media frenzy happens and the masses are out for blood. And it's like our judicial system is so flawed that a lot of the time we're going after the wrong people. And then we're not taking a holistic approach to figuring out, well, how the fuck did this even happen? And how can we prevent it in the future? Because ideally our jobs wouldn't exist. In an ideal world, we would have no content to discuss, and but that's not reasonable because human beings
Are
gonna
horrible and violent.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's an interesting thing to be in this space and almost have sometimes a little bit of the ick for that like ravenous consumption of true crime and that sort of thirst for quote unquote justice when it's like really coming out as vengeance.
Yeah.
And that's something that I certainly grapple with, doing.
I'd like to believe that all the fans of SKS, Someone Knows Something, the people that I've communicated with anyway, have, are sort of with that concept or these concepts we're talking about. But I'm sure that some of them aren't, and that's okay too. If someone isn't listening to you, then you're not connecting to them, right? So it's way better to get a broad listenership, and then talk about the things that's interesting to you, and maybe you can change the broad listenership, and maybe at least you're bringing people in that wouldn't regularly listen to this kind of stuff,
Well, when you bring your, values and your approach into your work, then you're going to attract people who are connected with that process. And so I think we can both agree that with our own listeners, there is sort of that like safety bubble.
Yeah.
It's like, oh, I mean, you're listening to me because you, for the most part, share a similar value system and kind of agree with what we're saying. And that's not to say that we don't get, constructive feedback and we don't fuck up and make mistakes, because we do. We're human too.
Yeah.
Have you gotten, listen.
Have I ever made a mistake?
We're podcast.
No.
Well,
Sorry.
okay. We know the answer to that question. It's an unequivocal no.
Yeah, never.
But have you gotten feedback from any, not necessarily even family members, but people, whether they're connected to the cases that you cover or not, that is less than happy? Like, because we get it sometimes too, not really from families. We don't really interact in that way, but I'm just curious, like how you handle some of the less savory emails about your content.
I get some unsavory type emails, but not a lot, I have to say. And I don't get much negative back from family. I would say negative, like harsh negative. there have been cases where it's like, oh, you should have mentioned this about X because it would have made them look a little nicer, you know, and instead of like this person that you portrayed, but it wasn't any willingness, wasn't any intention on my part to present the person in that light. Just I was just saying what I thought were facts about the person, for example, and I should have maybe broadened the fact field. But that's only happened maybe once. In terms of, some people just hate my voice. Like I've heard a lot, and I don't like it either. So
Been there.
Yeah, I don't like my voice either. But I would say 95% of people love it for some reason. And it's like I'd hear David Ridgen read a cereal box or whatever. I'd fall asleep to David Ridgen any day. Is that a compliment? Like I'd fall asleep to your bullshit any day, kind of thing. But yeah, I mean, some people can't handle the voice. Some people, I've read, what is it? Total period. Fucking period garbage period like that, you know, stuff like that. That is very inarticulate. Yeah, well,
free content.
I would want to engage with these people if I thought they were real people or just not, you know, a competing podcaster or something like that. 'Cause I'm
They're
sure
not
that
serious
happens.
people.
I just don't understand some of the stuff. It's like none of this is ever solved. The other one I get is none of these cases have ever been solved, and it's like, well, no.
Right.
In fact, all of them are solved. Like most of them are solved. Maybe one. But we just haven't got the actual gavel fall yet. And, you know, and if you're only looking for a gavel fall, then you've missed the point of the entire series, right?
Exactly.
Like
Right.
it's not necessarily just about getting a guy, like, yeah, get the guy behind bars. And then the families are still with their loss, still competing with
Right.
themselves for how do I live, still trying to figure the fuck themselves out. And, you know, that's the storytelling part of it that I think is important, that many listeners, like, every season, doesn't matter what I do, I could like find Jesus Christ, and it's like, I loved it. When's the next one coming? You know, I loved fuck Jesus was so great.
Give
And
me
you found him
more.
in
Next.
that cave. Yeah,
Next.
Yeah, Martian next. You know, like what? Jesus. What? Just do it again. Do it again.
Yeah.
Do it again.
That
And it's like
thirst for content
holy
is
fuck.
like it is a compliment in some ways because it means that they are really connecting with what you're putting out there. But like, it is hard. I mean, I have another podcast that's not at all related to true crime in any way, shape, or form, but it is season based, and we take a break between seasons because we're human beings with lives, and like we get sick, and you know, we have to recover, and we have to prepare, and we do live shows, we have to do all of this stuff. And sometimes the only feedback we get is like, oh my God, why are you making us wait so long for another
like
new episode? Oh my God, there's not another new episode.
Yeah.
And you're like, bitch, this took 15 fucking years to put together for season whatever. And you're going to fucking complain on social media that there isn't a new episode. Like, that shit makes me want to pull my fucking eyelashes out. It makes me so mad. And that's on such a small scale. Like on my other show, we fucking read romance novels. You're like investigating shit for fucking the 2 decades.
Yeah. How
and they're
fast
like,
can
next.
I possibly churn this shit out?
I'm like, Jesus, please.
Well, I don't think people realize I'm working on lots of cases that are nowhere near completion yet that no one's heard about before. Like, you know, there's lots of stuff going on here. It's not just one thing at a time, you know, like, next interview, 3 weeks from now. There's shit happening every day all the time. Like, I've probably gotten texts from 3 different family members while I'm talking to you here.
Yeah.
So,
Right.
it's not like, you know, and it takes a lot. It's just I am just one dude as the bottleneck, because that's, I mean, SKS works because I take in everything, right? It's not like 3 investigators on the ground and we're all convening at the end of the day. Like, I do all the on ground interviews are me. So I am the bottleneck, but I think the bottleneck can be part of the reason for the success, just because all the information goes to one place. But anyway, that's, we can move on to another question if you want. I think I kind of took that off in a different direction.
I love it.
I just have something to say. I was going to say this a while back. I mean, we were talking about like how maybe police don't always want to talk to reporters. And I was thinking about like, well, we all operate on completely different timelines too, because I was looking up one of the cases that you had done in a previous season, and they were just waiting on some fucking DNA. It was like the burnt bones in Mississippi. They were just waiting on those to be tested to see if they belonged to, I think, Donald.
Yep. Donald Izette. Yep.
Donald Izette. It's like, that was 5 fucking years ago. Like the timelines that everyone operates on are so drastically different.
I don't think a lot of people look at the dates of postings and stuff like that. And I will admit that, and I'm not an expert on a lot of this, the sort of how how the sort of things are fed out. You know, like Spotify has a different way of labeling and listing things. And I do find it, like, I think iTunes, it can get a little bit mixed up. Like, you can't quite,
it does.
You sometimes can't see that there's an update episode at the end. Instead, it goes to the next season. And then sort of at the end of that one is the update episode number for the previous. And it's like, I can understand those questions. But I can't, like, I'm also one of those guys that if someone asks me for help, I say, okay, get out of your chair. And I sit in their chair and help, like I do it for them. So I can't, it's really frustrating for me because I don't know how to help them figure it out, you know, because I usually just show them what to do, right? And I have a hard time explaining, you know, that little dot over on the right, left, you know, it's just like, I can't do it for thousands of people. And sometimes people are just confused by the nomenclature of the naming system, you know, for example. And I don't really know how to help, all that to say. And, you know, sometimes there isn't an update episode, but also I'm working on probably update episodes for every season all the time, right? I've gathered for season 2, probably a whole other season already that I haven't been able to get to. And I'm waiting for another shoe to drop in certain circumstances, right? So
you're working so quickly and so in real time in a lot of respects. And
I'm actually working as fast as I can. And in terms and as carefully as I can, right? And
some of these cases you're like, okay, well, we're waiting a couple years on these results from these testings, like the sample testing.
Yeah. And it's like, well, those results have already been, we've already actually had an episode about that, and we've actually moved on to a different thing. And
I think it can also be easy to forget from a listener standpoint that just because you're focusing on or releasing episodes in a season that are only focused on one case does not mean that you are in real time not actively working on multiple cases. Yeah, for sure.
Sitting and waiting for a result from that episode, for example. No, I'm like constantly getting stuff from everything, right? Like I get tips and stuff based on season 1, episode 1. You know, I even get comments on episode 0 from the first one ever. It was me just sort of ruminating about should I do it or not, or whatever the hell that was all about. Like, it's like, whatever. Anyways, so yeah, it's ongoing, and I'm just one guy, which is, I think, a good thing with these cases.
Yeah.
But it's frustrating that sometimes I get frustrated that I can't do it fast enough. You know, sometimes I do take it to heart, that stuff, and who cares, I guess. But
well, you're doing a really fucking great job.
Well, thank you.
And we do stand a podcast that's actually solving cases and like progressing things forward, because we're super not that.
We're not doing that.
We're not doing
progressing the wine world, though. You're kind of helping.
But also just like in the true crime space from like an ethics perspective, if you're going to engage in that work, also like know what your skill set is and stay in your lane.
That is not a comedy podcast. Talking to family members, not for comedians.
No. And our show is primarily a comedy show because of me and Lucy's, you know, rapport and how we can connect certain things that we talk about to our own lives. But, you know, that doesn't mean that we're not covering serious topics that deserve reverence and care. You can do both, but we also know that we are not equipped to shift into what you have had, you know, a lifetime of training to be able to do.
On the job training. I would say that you guys have a lot of humility, which is important in any storytelling and also in a podcast like yours. So I think, and in true crime realm, humility is a big deal. Like you know, one pet peeve I have, this is going to go somewhere negative that I maybe.
We can always cut it.
One pet peeve I have is podcasters or any filmmaker making a claim that isn't true about what they've accomplished. Right. And I think you may know some examples of I solved the crime, or, you know, I stopped whales from being hunted, or, you know, dolphins, you know, the Cove, for example.
There are names popping up in my head that I'm not going to say so I don't
Cove,
get sued.
Oscar-winning documentary. We stopped dolphin hunting or whatever. It's actually, it's increased. Nothing's happened. It's a bunch of college frat boys got together for that documentary. Anyway, I'm going to get in trouble. But they did. What was their big accomplishment? And anyway, I just think there's that happens all the time, especially out of the States. There's a lot of a rush to make a claim about what you have done, right?
You want to put your stake in the ground on that land.
And I solved this thing, and it's hard for me to say that, you know, that I solved something. And people want me to say it all the time, and they want me to, and in some cases it's fucking true. And it is fucking true, but I still have trouble saying it because I just think, who cares? You know, it doesn't, like, maybe the media outlet needs it as their lead, but anyway, I just have a pet peeve with these massive claims of, you know, there was X number of episodes that didn't mention this guy's name, and then he came forward, and I'm the reason that he came forward. You know, and it's like, okay, you didn't even know he existed.
You're also like standing on the shoulders of, you know, everyone who's done a bunch of work before you or whoever entered the picture too. So
yeah, it's a relay race, a marathon sometimes. Right. You know, sometimes you're passing things on. Sometimes you come back and you rerun the race with a different baton. But, you know, I've done that before too. You revisit cases and I just never go away. It's my technique, right? Yeah. I just never stop on it. It's easy to go away and forget about the stuff and just move on to another story, and everybody still thinks you're a superstar or whatever. But that's not the point, is it? So anyway, the pet peeve aside, humility is important, and I'll emphasize that to anybody listening out there that cares about wanting to make a podcast.
Well, and, you know, God willing, any of the cases that we have covered that are unsolved, you hope that the reach of your show could potentially spark interest or, you know, bring someone forward to maybe share information that they hadn't before. But we certainly would never take the stance that, oh, we solved that because they listened to Wine and Crime. Like, that would be so absurd of us to ever say in a million years. Well, but you hope that your show is having an impact. And I think that we see that impact in a lot of different ways. Our show's impact really is more on the listener to, you know, provide them with some community and connection and, you know, around a shared interest, even if we're not claiming to be armchair investigators who are trying to solve crimes.
There was a really good quote that I read in an article. Your season 5, Carrie Brown.
Someone wrote an article about me or the case.
You were mentioned in it. Mentioned in it, but her brother David said that you and your show kicked the hornet's nest.
That's Trevor,
and just like reignited you know, interest in the case. And in a lot of respects, that's what we would hope to do, because we're not out there interviewing anyone.
Yeah, kicking the hornet's nest is important, you know, and going to a place where you know you're going to get stung for doing something that's what you have to do sometimes to has to be an outsider sometimes too, right? Like, I'm a Canadian and went to Mississippi, you know, and Southwest Mississippi, where I was not familiar, but now I feel like it's a second home for some reason. But you know, that's outsider dude came down and could say and do things that others wouldn't or just didn't think of or whatever. I don't know what it is, but it's just stasis. Sometimes you have to be that outsider and do that. I've had to actually, someone else said, I think Thomas Moore said, kick the hornet's nest. Said, we kicked the hornet's nest. So maybe Trevor quoting Thomas, actually, because that's another quote. That's the same comment that Thomas gave about what we did in that case.
Yeah. Well, it was a great analogy. And I think that, to your point, an outsider coming down to Mississippi, it's like, maybe you need someone who's completely removed from the context of like everything that's been established about that case so far, so you can see and draw different connections. I
think so. Yeah. Someone with good intentions, good faith, you know. Sometimes I think we'll never have another good faith conversation on this planet where you can actually talk about your opinions without, you know, having your head chopped off. But,
well, we had a good run.
Yeah, but we had a good run. So yeah, having good faith conversations, important.
Yeah. Maybe now is a good time to hear another word from our sponsors, and then we're going to get into some specific cases that you have covered on Someone Knows Something in previous and your current season.
This episode of Wine and Crime is brought to you by Progressive Insurance.
Do you ever think about switching insurance companies to see if you could save some cash? Progressive makes it easy to see if you could save when you bundle your home and auto policies.
Try it at Progressive.com.
Progressive Casualty Insurance Company and affiliates. Potential savings will vary. Not available in all states.
I'm no tech genius, but I know if I want my business to crush it, I need a website now. Thankfully, Bluehost makes it easy. I customized, optimized, and monetized everything exactly how I wanted with AI. Within minutes, my site was up. I couldn't believe it. Plus, Bluehost keeps me protected 24/7. No more worrying about hackers. I just relax and focus on my customers. So, whatever your hustle may be, secure your online presence in 2025 with Bluehost. Head to Bluehost.com to start now.
This time of year, every cat is an indoor cat, myself included. And when it's freezing outside, we're indoor humans, babe. If there's one thing that can really stink up being inside when it's so cold, it's the litter box. Do not let that nasty smell ruin your winter wonderland. Switch to Pretty Litter like we did.
Yeah, we're both Pretty Litter households with our 4 combined cats.
Our children.
Our babies. Pretty Litter's non-clumping formula traps odor and moisture. It's ultra absorbent. It is so lightweight. It's low dust. And 1 6-pound bag works for up to a month.
It's so great.
And the best part about Pretty Litter is that it gives me peace of mind because the crystals change color to indicate like health issues, such as early signs of potential illness in my cat, like UTIs, kidney issues, all sorts of stuff. And since Pretty Litter ships free directly to my door, I never run out. And if you have ever gone to Target or the grocery store to buy cat litter,
Lugging those massive... No, thank you.
like bring your 6 construction crew friends to help you carry it.
No, my upper body strength could never.
Ships straight to your door, so I never run out. I don't have these huge litter bags or like the plastic jugs like taking up all this space. I don't have to go outside in the cold because remember, we're indoor humans now. It also does not track the way that like clay litters do.
Yeah.
So just like the dust and the mess alone
Is way, way minimized with Pretty Litter. I've noticed that too. It's awesome.
Pretty Litter has changed the game for both of our households.
It's true. Indoor cats and indoor humans agree. Pretty Litter helps my house smell fresh and clean. Go to prettylitter.com/gals to save 20% on your first order and get a free cat toy. That's prettylitter.com/gals to save 20% on your first order and get a free cat toy. prettylitter.com/gals. Terms and conditions apply. See site for details. So, will you take us through your current season, current case, what's going on with Christine Haron and what you're working on?
Okay, season 9 of Someone Knows Something is about a 15-year-old named Christine Haron, who was a rebellious teen who didn't like school, who lived in Hanover, Ontario. May 18th, 1993, she was staying home from school. She didn't feel very well. She was lying on the couch with her mom. Her mom wanted her to go to school. Chrissy just hated it, but also didn't feel well. So it was a good excuse to stay home. But by around noon or 1 o'clock, the truant officer, who I guess existed at that time, called and said, "What's going on?" So the mother, Marianne is Chrissy's mother's name. And Chrissy argued a bit more about whether she should go. And eventually Chrissy just walked out, slammed the door, allegedly on her way to school. Marianne says she watched Chrissy walk down the street and turn the corner, but that was the last she ever saw of her. And that was it. May 18th, 1993, to this day, has not seen her daughter. And it's a case that I had found out about. I'm a documentary filmmaker. I've been looking at these so-called cold cases since 2004, which we talked about. And at the time, I was developing some television documentaries for CBC in the late 2000s about cold cases. And I recall Chrissy's case made the shortlist, my shortlist, right away for several reasons. One, I attended a memorial service for her that was in Hanover, which is a southwestern Ontario little town that used to make furniture, but now I think it's mostly kind of reselling old clothes or something.
I love that.
Yeah, well, it's a Dickies. There's a Dickies sort of outlet. Dickies is a clothing company, and I think they just have an outlet there.
We know Dickies.
Yeah. So anyway, I went to Hanover to the church where Chrissy used to go to a service that was being put on about her so many years later. Her photo was there, and there's just something about how people spoke about her that made me want to help. I remember the minister talking about her. I remember seeing the police standing there. I'd never met the family yet. I saw Chrissy's mom, Marianne, sitting at the front. And I walked out with the associate producer after. I didn't even approach the family at that point. And I remember saying to the associate producer that Chrissy was just someone that I really had wished I was able to meet. And I remember crying. I remember I was in tears. It was really strange. I mean, I cry easily, but it was still strange for me. And I just remember that heat of frustration that I could, maybe have done or do something about the case. And I was just frustrated about nothing having been done. And a good reason to look at the case was also that nobody had touched it. Literally, there's a mountain of information available. Nobody knew about it. And another good reason was that there seemed to be a suspect. And there had been a trial that had failed. And I wanted to know about that and help Marianne to learn about all of that at the same time. Marianne, her mother, was game. And of course, I'd never have looked at the case without her consent or participation in that. So we decided to look back at the case. This is 2009. And it kind of went from there. It's a story with many twists and turns. And there's intricacy and triumphs and failures and all that with other players, not just me. Part of the reason I was intrigued by Chrissy's case is because there appeared to be a suspect. I've said that already. And not one that the police had found. They did not know about this guy. Up until August of 2004, police had no idea what happened to Chrissy. And remember, she disappeared 11 years before this in May of 1993. So in August 2004, at a party with his family members, a man aged 35 at the time, near the end of the evening, after some drinks, supposedly, and some kind of upset that he had with his family, started telling people that he had killed Christine Haron. He picked up the phone, he dialed 911, and then he hung up. But the police responded anyway, because up here, based on a 911 hang up, they still come. And so the cop came, walked up the stairs towards, it was sort of like a fire escapey type stairs outside this party house. So this man walks down the stairs toward the cop, had his hands together as if to be handcuffed, and confesses, to the cop, that he killed Chrissy, to this responding officer. And he says and eventually he says he can show police where he left her. And at the time, 11 years earlier, when Chrissy disappeared, the guy would have been 24 years old. And his name was Anthony Edward Ringel. And that's one of the main subjects of the podcast. Anthony was born on December 10th, 1968. So just after me, a couple months later. I'm not old. He was one of 6 children.
Not old.
People think I'm like this 25-year-old sort of hunk or something. I'm like friggin' Santa. I look like Santa Claus, for Christ's sake. Anyways.
That's nobody thinks that about us. So congratulations.
Okay.
We are not being mistaken for 25-year-old hunks.
But they think I'm 25, okay? Anyways.
Projection.
Yeah, shit. Anyway, it's funny, when I go to these conferences, the first, apologies, Chrissy, when I go to these conferences and do these big talks and stuff, the first thing I do is say, I apologize. I say, I apologize. And everybody knows what I'm talking about immediately.
You're Canadian. This voice, so isn't that like your culture?
You're sorry.
Yeah.
Sorry.
I apologize that this voice comes out of this body, basically. Right? And they're like, oh my God, laughing, whatever. It's the best.
It's like a voice modulator.
It just shows,
Yeah, do all of your special appearances behind a screen.
Pay no attention to
with
that
a
man
voice
behind
modulator.
The curtain. Yeah.
Chuck Tingle style.
This is why David didn't want to be on camera today. We're hiding his Santa
That's
Claus
it.
like
It's just a big downer. It's
identity.
Like, fuck, that's the guy I'm listening to. Anyway, shit. People tell me there's always women writing me and saying I'm in my bathtub and I like to listen to you when I'm taking my baths, and I'm just like.
He's like the Canadian Justin Evans.
Someone sent me pictures of her painted toenails on the beach, and I'm just like, okay.
Oh.
Anyway.
You're getting free foot pics?
Yeah, I never respond to any of that, of course. Anyways.
Damn. We are not getting free foot pics, tell you what.
I'll send you some of mine.
That would be great.
Anyway.
Your feet.
Share your bounty, please.
I want pics of your feet.
Yeah. Okay, so back to this dude who confesses to killing Christine Haron. Mm-hmm. He's about 5'9". He's got blunt features. He's kind of long, thinning brown hair. He's not that. He just looks like a guy. He worked at local Canadian Tire here, which is a hardware sort of chain up here, big one. But he was unemployed in May 1993. And I did meet him. When I met him, he was living between locations, including.
Did he creep you out?
I don't like to answer the question like that. It was a difficult conversation. I'm sure I creep people out, right? So,
but you didn't.
I probably fucking creeped him out more than he creeped me out. Just let's be honest.
Definitely, yeah.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. So anyway, I met him at a trailer park. So speeding up the story, let's get through here so that people can get to the podcast and sending me more toe pictures. Ringo goes through the stages of what would have been a murder trial in 2006. He confesses 2005, in jail for till 2006, waiting for this trial. But the judge throws the case out, basically, because of police mistakes. And I go through all that in the podcast. The case is stayed for a year, which means it just stays still until something new is brought forward. And if it isn't, then it gets canceled, basically. So it stayed for a year, but Ringel's freed because nothing new happens. And it just ends. So Anthony Ringel still lived in the area. And nobody had done anything. No reporter talks to him. No police action can be seen to be happening. This is 2006. So add 3 more years to that, and I come on the scene in 2009, the church meeting, etc. Then I start to work with Chrissy's mom, Marianne. Police barely assist me. I wonder why. But regardless, I'm able to uncover many of the court files, investigative documents from the case that haven't no one's ever seen them before. Have to get them transcribed for the first time, which is always a good sign because it means no one else has done it. So Marianne, for the first time, the family member learning what happened, she learns for the first time what happened. Why did the case fail? What did Anthony say? What were some of the things he said he did with Chrissy that day?
Oh, she hadn't even had
any of this information. So we go from there. And remember, this was for a television doc. This is back in 2009, 2010. So I'm shooting this myself with my cameras for television. So again, I always work on my own when I'm not with a family member. So I'm taping tripods to the floor and like driving around trying to get the angle right, practicing on arcades instead of someone's house. Anyway, so Marianne is very brave throughout this process. She's confronting the murder of her daughter for the first time. And I find out where Anthony is, this dude who confessed. And Marianne and I try to go talk to him. Marianne wants to talk to him. But that scenario plays out a bit differently than we'd planned. I'm not going to go into all of it. So she is unable to speak to him on that event. I go and try to speak to Anthony myself, which I do on a cold knock at his trailer once I find the right trailer. And we speak for a long time. No reporter had ever talked to him before or since. So I ask him some very direct and pointed questions. Why did you say you killed her? Did you kill Christine? And then, so all of that, all the information that we gather, all the court drama, talking to Ringo, working with Marianne, talking to all these other people, all that goes into a 20-minute TV documentary made for CBC. It goes to air on the big news channel here across the country in spring of 2012. And shortly after that goes to air, the police start an undercover operation on Anthony Ringel. So this is years after they had stopped working on it. In the same trailer park, they start this undercover operation where I met him. And the podcast tells this whole story too, and then picks up where the TV show left off and tells the rest of the story of how it happened. And it's a story, yes. And here we go back to the talking about the dolphins. It's a story that shows directly how my work and Marianne's led to the arrest of Anthony Ringel, the rearrest in February 2013. And it's probably not what you're expecting, but the work leads directly to this point. Except this time when he's arrested, the trial goes forward in 2016 and Anthony Edward Ringel's convicted. And he's now in jail serving a life sentence here in Ontario in a federal penitentiary for second-degree murder of Christine Haron. So the full story is on season 9 of Someone Knows Something. And I actually... People say, what do you feel? How do you feel about having some? I think it's amazing. I think the work did its job, and it makes me feel good. So,
right. The work did its job.
The work did its job.
It's just so bizarre and frustrating that, as you said, the case failed the first go in court.
So many balls were dropped.
Clarifying question. So because Marianne didn't have access to court transcripts in the US, like the family can be in court during the trial. Is that like not a thing?
No, I think actually,
or was that not a thing?
I think that's actually part of it, is that she was asked not to be there on certain occasions. Okay. Yeah, so that's why, and police deliberately left things out for her because of, I guess the allegedly holdback, but also they knew that she was going to hear what happened, right? Like
I can't even imagine what that
and afterwards
must have felt like for her.
After the first iteration, once the first doc went to air, I was contacted by police and they said, I hope you know that's not all of us, kind of thing. Like we didn't do those errors. It was this guy or whatever. It was this.
Oh, sure, of course.
Basically
that's why
pointing the fingers at a very sort of narrow set of people.
Yeah,
but and they were sensitive to that. And anyway, here we are. So it's it's an interesting season. It's a very difficult listen. Some of the episodes are very tough listening. Some of the most difficult listening, I think, in SKS history to some extent. But they're important episodes for SKS, for Someone Knows Something. It's an important season for Someone Knows Something. And it's an important season for Chrissy as well. So
well, and it's frustrating and, hopeful that you are drawn to cases where, as you said, people just aren't looking at them anymore. And, there's a term that we use in the US that's like missing white girl syndrome. Gabby Petito's father has come out. I guess he's working on a series that is trying to bring this to the forefront, this systemic issue to the forefront of forgotten cases and ignored cases that are especially around specifically women and girls of color, Indigenous women and girls, queer, femme, people. And in this case, without even, applying any of these identities to this victim, but just the mere fact that other cases can eclipse, like look at JonBenet Ramsey, other cases can eclipse the media space in such a way that we forget that there are cases of missing people every single day that are not getting any attention. And then you decide to give that case attention and it leads to a possible resolution. Like I'm not saying all this took an extreme amount of work, but a start was, let's go back and talk to him again, because no one fucking has since the first trial didn't go anywhere. So we just
dropped it.
Didn't try again.
Yeah. Just back to your point about victimology, when I call victimology, kind of who the victim is. It's important to me in assessing whether I want to do a case or not too. And let's just say I've been asked to do cases of really popular cases that have tons of people working on them. And I'm almost always say no, because why would I do that? Why would I go and do a case that is already in the news and has a lot of people on it? They're rich people or whatever. Like, we really should be looking at cases that nobody else has ever done before, and that have, the information is sparse or at least hasn't been looked at for a while. And maybe it's a case that has been looked at by many people, but then was dropped for some reason, right? That always leaves a lot of interesting material out there. So I've done that before too. And like the Dean Moore case had been looked at before once, not very well. But anyway, the victimology is important to me in picking what case I do, so, and I think we have a diversity across our cases. So, yeah.
And in this specific instance, again, without giving details so that people are drawn to get the full scope from season 9, but is it safe to assume that revisiting this suspect led to new or maybe looked at in a different way evidence that allowed this to go to trial successfully?
100%.
The second time
100%.
around. Okay.
The work that I did with Marianne is what allowed police to arrest Anthony and what helped successfully prosecute him.
Because that is common. I mean, we hear about that all the time in the United States, and it, is something that's come up. I hate to keep going back to JonBenet, but it's just like so in the zeitgeist again right now. That's come up in that case too, where we may have a suspect and the evidence is not sufficient to actually hold up. Like the case won't make it all the way through the court system. You have to have all of that before you decide to prosecute.
Yeah.
And that can be really frustrating, but I mean, it makes sense. Giving it that second eye and that second go over, or third, fourth, fifth, sixth, seventh, to make sure that you have what is needed to actually fully go through the process of trial.
Yeah, I mean, it's also kind of sparking the police to do something too, right? Like that's part of it, but that's always happening, right? And like that, I'll take the credit for doing that too before, but that's not what that happened here, but that's not the only thing that happened here that led to, and the judge acknowledged the CBC work, like my work in the trial, etc. So it's not a spurious claim. Anyway, that's it. That's all.
You did save the dolphins.
I did. Yeah. I wish. Yeah, I wish
It was
that
you.
I had saved the dolphins as well. But every day I wish that. But anyway, I do what I can.
Every day.
Well, I'm very excited to listen to this season. I am definitely someone who has listened to previous seasons of your show. Nice. And I have to admit, I have fallen asleep to your voice before. It's very soothing.
It is really soothing.
It is a compliment. It does not mean that your show is boring. I often put on true crime podcasts when I'm trying to like slow my brain down for whatever reason. And then
no, it's whatever.
Into comfort.
Your cadence is really nice. You speak nice and you sound like you know what the fuck you're talking about. And that's reassuring to me.
That's good.
If you can help people sleep and also, in the process.
If I can help people relax, that's great. Because I need that.
Help move some unsolved cases along, then fuck. Why not both?
Sure. Mm-hmm. Yeah, no. If it relaxes people, so much the better. That's it. I like that. I like to hear that. So
I love it. So where can everybody find you? Maybe not in person because
What's your address?
What's your address? And I almost asked what your social security number is, but I don't know if they have that again.
Yeah, we have something called a SIN number, social insurance number is what it's called.
If you want to drop those details, date birth.
Yeah, no,
that'd be great.
You can find Someone Knows Something. They always say wherever you get your podcasts. So Spotify, iTunes, CBC has a great, it's actually kind of a very plain Someone Knows Something website, but it has all the seasons well organized. CBC.ca, iTunes, you just look for Someone Knows Something. In your podcast server, you just look up Someone Knows Something. All the seasons are labeled there. I have my own website, ridgenfilm.com, which is mostly updated. I still have to update it for the new season because I'm the guy who does that. When I get time, I do it. So yeah, Ridgen Film has everything. Most of the things I've done are on Ridgen Film, things that were broadcast or done as a sort of media pro type person.
Great. And without giving anything away, I'm curious, do you have visions for season 10?
It's already been done.
11?
I've already gathered most of season 10, and I still have about 10% to gather. But yeah, that's my next step, to work on season 10. There's also Someone Knows Something drama that I'm working on that CBC is working on as well. But
David, your time management skills are
I don't know
stellar.
How you do it.
Well, yeah.
I could barely feed myself. And you've got a kid. Lucy's got a kid. I don't know how y'all. I don't know how y'all fucking handle that shit. Takes a very special person, and I am not her.
I got lots of wrinkles. I notice a lot of wrinkles and bags under my eyes and stuff, which are not normal.
Yeah, and you're only 25.
I'm only 25. So what happens when I'm 30? Jesus.
It's that cold North Pole air.
That's it. Yeah. I live in an igloo like all other Canadians. Yeah.
You're fortified like an ice wine.
Yeah. And being Santa. Yes, of course. Being Santa. And I've got to get my reindeer, by the way. So
that is helpful. Well, then we will let you go because you have to get to the workshop.
Of course.
But
yes.
Thank you so much for joining us today and, going deep and picking all these topics apart. And it was a really enjoyable conversation. We really appreciate it.
Yeah, thanks to you both. It was very nice. Thanks a lot. And send me a free bottle of wine or something.
Done.
Sure.
Can do.
That's
easy. That's an easy ask. Listen,
it's okay.
That is an easy ask. We'll send you some gal's wine.
Yep.
Okay. Thanks a lot, you guys. We'll talk again.
Have a good day.
Thanks, David. Thanks for listening to Wine and Crime. Our cover art is by Danielle Sylvan. Music by Phil Young and Corey Wendell. Editing by Jonathan Camp. Our production manager is Andrea Gardner. For photos, sources, and other resources, head to wineandcrimepodcast.com. You can follow us on all the socials at Wine and Crime Pod. If you'd like to show your support and get access to all sorts of wine-fueled bonus content, check out our premium channel at wineandcrimepodcast.com/uncorked. Cheers!
This episode of Wine and Crime is brought to you by Progressive Insurance.
Do you ever think about switching insurance companies to see if you could save some cash? Progressive makes it easy to see if you could save when you bundle your home and auto policies.
Try it at Progressive.com.
Progressive Casualty Insurance Company and Affiliates. Potential savings will vary. Not available in all states.
Hey there, Ryan Reynolds here. It's a new year, and you know what that means. No, not the diet. Resolutions. A way for us all to try and do a little bit better than we did last year. And my resolution, unlike big wireless, is to not be a raging and raise the price of wireless on you every chance I get. Give it a try at mintmobile.com/switch.
$45 upfront payment required, equivalent to $15 per month. New customers on first 3-month plan only. Taxes and fees extra. Speed slower above 40 gigabytes on unlimited. See mintmobile.com for details.